Anyway, welcome to Having a Blast, and it's nice to see so many people out. My name is Karen Poggle-Fuhrer. I'm the program coordinator here with the Labrador Institute in Lab West, and I work here out of this building. My office is right there. Before we get into the agenda this evening, I just wanted to make you aware of the emergency exits. In case of an emergency, we'll use the main entrance. If that happens to be blocked for whatever reason, we'll go through the double doors at the end of the foyer and turn left to the side parking lot, or you can turn right and go to the back parking lot in case of an emergency, which we hope will not happen. Washrooms are also located through the double doors and just to your left as well on the way to the cafeteria. I want to first start by acknowledging the participation of our other partners in this event. Dr. Richard Sawyer, Campus Administrator of College of North Atlantic, for providing absolutely free use of this wonderful space here and the equipment. College maintenance staff and college support staff for helping me organize and get the system going. I wouldn't have done this without their help. I also want to thank Jordan Brown and Labrador Heritage Society Height of Land Branch for working with us to organize this event. And finally, Jeanette O'Keefe and Christopher Fahn of IOC, Community and External Relations team, for embracing this idea and for their hard work in helping providing a speaker and also for sponsoring our upcoming refreshment break. I also want to introduce my Labrador Institute colleagues who's traveled over from Goose Bay and Northwest River to help me here tonight. So if you wouldn't mind just waiting or standing when I call your name, just so everybody can see what a wonderful team we have here. So we have Dr. Martha McDonald, Associate Director, and we have Dr. Scott Nielsen. He's the Assistant Professor in Arts and Archaeology. Miss Marilyn Cribb, Coordinator, Facilities, Logistics, and Promotion. Morgan Mills, Program Coordinator over in Happy Valley. Caitlin LaPalme, and Laboratory Coordinator in Northwest River. Thanks, guys, for coming over. We're just going to start our agenda. Just an overview of what we're going to be doing this evening. And we're going to start with Dr. Martha McDonald. I'm just going to give a little introduction before she begins. Martha is the Associate Director of the Labrador Institute, and she's lived in Labrador since 1988. She's involved in educational programs at the LI, most recently the Inuit Bachelor of Education program, in which she has taught 2 vocal courses. Her research interests are in language loss, identity, and the performing arts. She has published some children's books from different regions of Labrador, which you can see on display in the foyer during the break. We have our Labrador Institute display in the far left corner. And she's hoping to work on one from this community. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. So Martha?
Good evening, everyone, and thanks very much for coming out tonight. I'd like to give special thanks to Karen, who's organized everything and is really on top of all the events that we load onto her. As our single and only representative here, she has to do the work of 16 of us who work over in Goose Bay. So thank you, Karen. Bringing greetings from our director, Dr. Ashley Consolo, and she just wanted to say that we're really excited to be here to talk to you about possible ideas that you may have for research and engagement and possible programming that the Labrador Institute can do over in this part of our region. Labrador Institute is a unit of Memorial. It's been located in Goose Bay since 1979. It began with a dust study, apparently. So, and I guess the excitement just built upwards from there. But our job is to bring Labrador to the university and the university to Labrador, and to have some useful collaborations and partnerships between our communities and the university that is designed to serve the public good in this province. So we do education programs, research, collaboration, and education. And as I said, there's 16 of us. There are faculty members, program coordinators, staff who do program coordination and support. And there are people that do research only and others who teach. Our research ranges from soil science to geochemistry to marine ecology, archaeology, literature, and of course, most importantly, folklore. Some education programming. Right now we have the Inuit Bachelor of Education program. Those students are all Nunatsuka beneficiaries, and they're doing Memorial's primary elementary education program in Goose Bay, and they're in their third year there, but their second year of the education program. And they do everything in Goose Bay, and there are a lot of supports for them to maintain their cultural identity and to enhance what they do and infuse Inuit culture into the programs that they take so that they can go back to be teachers on the coast of Labrador. Previous to that, we had an Inuit Bachelor of Social Work program, which had the same principles, and we graduated 19 students, and that was in 2013. Scott and Morgan taught in that program as well, and it was a really new idea for our region, and it was something that really was bent on making the needs of the university and the abilities of the needs of the community and the abilities of the university come together. Our intention and our purpose is really to provide education and research in the North, for the North, and by the people of the North. And a university institute based entirely in the North is pretty rare. We're trying to think, how rare? Is it one of two, one of three? It's pretty rare. So we're lucky to have it, and we hope that we'll be able to continue for a long time to come. So what we want to do here is hear the ideas that you may have about things that Memorial can achieve in the person of the Labrador Institute that may have some special significance for people in this part of the region. So we're here to listen to what you might want to tell us, and I hope you'll enjoy the samples of our work that you'll see this evening. So thanks again to Karen for arranging the evening, and for all the contributors and all the people present for coming out to having a blast. Thank you.
Okay, our first presentation tonight will be Dr. Scott Nielsen. And Dr. Scott Nielsen is an assistant professor with the Department of Archaeology in the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences and the Labrador Institute. That's a mouthful. He has the privilege of working daily from the Labrador Institute Research Station in beautiful Northwest River. Scott is quite passionate about his research, which is primarily focused on the long-term history of Indigenous people in eastern Quebec and Labrador, and their relations with one another, settlers, visitors, government, and the environment. Generally, he's interested in the culture and history of small-scale societies from around the world, and the impact of climate, environment, and policy on their immediate adaptations and long-term transformations. He is also involved in cultural resource management and archaeological and anthropological theory. My God, he has all kinds of big words. He's smart. And the history and role of these disciplines within society. He holds a Bachelor of Arts from St. Thomas University, a Master of Arts from Memorial University, and also a PhD from Memorial University. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Karen. I got a presentation. Whoops. Those fancy words, there we go. Anyway, hello everybody. As Karen said, my name's Scott. If you're talking to me afterwards, you don't have to call me doctor. Scott is perfectly fine. As Karen said too, I work for MUN. I have a unique position in that I'm actually employed by the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, formerly the Faculty of Arts out of St. John's, and I think the term is housed by the Labrador Institute. So the Labrador Institute gives me a place to stay, an office, and all that sort of thing, which is happens to be about 2 minutes down the road from my house, so it's a pretty enviable situation. What I'm going to talk about tonight is not so much about my own research. I'm talking about that tomorrow night, and I'll give a bit of an introduction to that at the end of the presentation, but I thought I'd take inspiration from the fact that it's a Mining Week event and talk about early mining in Labrador. And by this I mean very early mining in Labrador, and mining's in quotation marks because it's not the type of mining that we think of when we think of mining, I guess. So just a brief overview of actually the details of my talk tonight. I'm just going to kind of touch on each one of these because I don't want to talk to you guys for too long and take everybody's time. I have the ability to go on for a bit of time if I get at it, so I'm going to try and limit myself a little bit with some notes anyway. But I'm going to give a brief overview of Labrador's archaeological history, and then I'm going to talk about the uses of stone or rocks in kind of the cultural history of Labrador. And then I'm going to give kind of 3 examples of some of the sources of these stones. And I'll particularly talk about quartzite cobbles, Rammet chert, and the Labrador trough chert, which people here, Labrador trough anyway, people here are certainly familiar with that. Just to give a brief example of the kind of the geographic region, if you can see these. So the quartzite cobbles, I'm going to talk about those. They're going to be from kind of Lake Melville, Chetajee, Northwest River area. Rammet chert, some of you may have heard of that before. It's a fairly famous rock, actually, from the northern Labrador up the Torn Gap Mountains. And then the Labrador trough chert specifically kind of comes from, that we find in the archaeological record, kind of comes from between just north of Shefferville and the Maniac region. Maniac Lake, as everybody here kind of, I'm sure, kind of knows where that is. The historical overview, I'm not going to go into much detail on this. It's one of these things that can actually be kind of boring. But just to suffice it to say that the archaeological history of Labrador prior to the arrival of Europeans is kind of divided into 3 broad time periods: the early period, the intermediate period, and the late period. Early period goes from about 9,000 years ago when people first come into Labrador until about 3,500 years ago. The intermediate period from about 3,500 years ago to about 2,000 years ago, and then the late period from about 2,000 years ago till European contact. And at European contact, we start calling it the historic period, and then in today, kind of from the, I guess kind of from the time of Lab City on, it's kind of the modern period, but there is still some archaeology from that period as well. This map that you see here is a map of all the registered archaeological sites in Newfoundland and Labrador, so it does give you an idea of kind of the intensity of it. One thing to point out, though, is that because there are blank spots on the map doesn't mean that there isn't archaeological sites there. It probably means that an archaeologist hasn't been there. As people in Labrador know, the Innu traveled across the interior of Labrador extensively, and their footprints are kind of all over the place once you actually start to look. I won't go into details about the kind of the cultural traditions, but just suffice it to say that there's kind of 2 broad traditions in Labrador. There's the First Nation side of the culture history, so the Innu and their predecessors or their ancestors, and then the Inuit and their predecessors. They're ethnically different languages, different ways of living in the world, sort of thing, different belief systems and all that sort of thing. Once you could say once the Norse show up and then they leave, but so once the Basque come, then we kind of start to have a continual European presence in Labrador as well. So some of the early uses of stone. The first thing, the one that most people are familiar with, is chipped stone, or flaking is the term that archaeologists would use. And what this is if you go down to the Gateway, for instance, and you go in and you look at their displays that they have there, they have a number of stone tools that were made, and most of the, well, actually, I think all the ones on display I haven't been there for a few years, so I could be wrong, but I think at least the majority of them on display there are from chipping. And what that is, you start out with a bigger rock, and it's kind of like woodworking, where you're shaving or knocking pieces off of it to turn it into a shaped object that can either be a spear point, an arrowhead, a hide scraper, those sorts of things. So in that process, you're actually using percussion and pressure to flake other rocks off, and in the end, you end up with a usable tool. And this is an example of kind of a number of different, it's a little bit hard to see, but there's a number of kind of bifaces there, so they've been worked on both sides, spear points, that sort of thing. And then this big pile of stuff is actually the debris that's left over in the process. And as archaeologists, that's mostly what we find, actually, is these little stone chips. You don't see them on displays in museums very often because they're not that nice to look at. However, that's actually where we learn a lot of the information about archaeology sites, because you can actually start to see where people sat at the archaeology site, what they were doing while they were there, and those sorts of activities. The next one is ground stone tools, and so this is a completely different process. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's done through grinding. So kind of rubbing rocks over and over again. Often these are the tools. There's an example of them here in the center slide. These will all be made out of slate. Slate is a fairly soft rock, so by using abrasive materials like sand and other coarser stones, you can actually shape them, and then at the end you can polish them, and you can make quite nice artifacts. And oftentimes archaeologists assume that these were used for woodworking. You can see the gouge like this, very similar to the types of stone. For anybody who makes like turned wood bowls and that sort of thing, you use very similar tools today, except they're made out of metal and not out of stone. One point I guess about this is some of my Innu colleagues, when they looked at some of these, when they took a tour of the Smithsonian, the first thing they said is, "Oh, that's an ice chisel. It's for making holes in the ice for ice fishing and that sort of thing." Archaeologists don't often think of that, but that's one of the benefits about being situated in the local community, is that you get new interpretations of tools that you may not have thought of as an archaeologist. And I think they're quite right that they certainly could have been used for that. Some of them are axes and things like that, though, and you can look at use-wear analysis and get an idea of a better idea of what they were used for. Oftentimes, these nice ones that are like this that aren't broken are from burial context. They were interred with people for a particular purpose when the people were buried in the ground. Another example would be stone vessels. So like something like this right here, this is a soapstone pot. The Inuit and their predecessors used these for heating their structures, for cooking and that sort of thing. These are made out of soapstone, a very soft rock. It's often used for carving today, and you can actually shape it into, sometimes this would be an earlier bowl form. So this style, this kind of deeper squarish shape is maybe 2,000 to 2,500 years ago. Once you get to the Inuit kind of more recent times, they're much broader and open and more open than the older ones. Other uses of stone are kind of stones that people haven't gone through as much effort to produce, but have picked up because they kind of serve a purpose and they get used. This is a quartzite cobble that you see here. I'll talk more about quartzite in a minute. But this is a hammerstone. So this is a rock that was actually used in the process of making those chipped stone artifacts like spear points and that sort of thing. This one actually, when you hold it in your hand, it's got this nice little notch that your thumb happens to fit in perfectly. It may have been that that was already there when the person picked it up, and that was one of the reasons why. Or they may have purposely removed that notch so that it fit better in their hand. But if you were to see this, people would often ask, well, how can you tell that's an artifact and not just a rock? If you were to see it in person, the whole circumference of it all the way around here is pitted all the way around. You can see that it was used for banging against another rock over and over again, or possibly for smashing up caribou bone and other animal bones for retrieving the marrow out of the inside. That's what this one here is. This is a pestle stone. It has had very little kind of transformation of the rock from when it was picked up originally by the person who was using it about 3,000 years ago. But it was found next to a campfire, next to an anvil stone, so a nice big flat stone, and there was a bunch of bone mash in the soil around it. So through kind of proxy evidence and analogy, I'm quite confident that it is a pestle stone, and I'm quite confident that it was used on the bone because it's not a really hard rock, and if you were using it, say, for making chipstone tools, that rock wouldn't last very long. So it's probably being used for crushing caribou bone. Very similar process to what the Innu do today. Now they use metal hammers and that sort of thing, but the retrieval of the bone marrow from the animal bones is a very important practice. So quartzite cobbles, I'm going to just talk briefly about them for a minute. So quartzite and other cobbles can be collected from glacial till and used for making stone tools. Labrador's covered with the evidence of past glaciers, glacial moraines, and what are the other ones? Eskers as well. Over where I live in Northwest River in Chesney actually sits on top of a glacial moraine that was created during the last glacial ice age when the glaciers were expanding. If anybody's ever been there, we're kind of on this big ridge sort of thing. So as the glaciers expanded, they kind of plowed this soil down there, and then when they melted and went away, they left all these rocks and stuff behind. And if anybody's been to Goose Bay, you can see the evidence of that kind of melting of all the sand that we have there as well. But out of Northwest River and Chesney, we have that sand, but it's a lot coarser, and we have lots and lots of cobbles in it, and quartzite cobbles. These quartzite cobbles, like the one you saw on the previous slide, there's another one there, were searched out and used specifically for making stone tools from. The red cobbles in particular, like the ones you see, there's a partial one there, there's a nice spear point made out of red quartzite there, and then a big pile of red quartzite flakes there. There was something about these red quartzite cobbles between about 3,200 and 2,800 years ago that people were really attracted to, and we find them using red quartzite all kind of over this kind of central Labrador region around Lake Melville, but also up on the coast up to towards Nain and that sort of thing as well. And so there was I think there was something about this color red that people were going after and using it. We find that they used other quartzite as well, but red quartzite at this point in time seems to be the most dominant one. Maybe it has something to do with related to life or death with the color of red. We also find them using red ochre, what we call red ochre, which is hematite crushed up into a powder used for pigment and that sort of thing. So red seemed to have a very important purpose. These artifacts actually come from an ongoing project that we have in Chevigit, an excavation that we're doing in this area right here. It's an archaeological site that was inhabited between about 3,200 years ago and 2,800 years ago. So people came there repeatedly over and over again. Chevigit, Northwest River, well, you can tell by looking at the map, it's a pretty good spot for fishing, hunting, and that sort of thing. But the fact that this rock is there and available in the glacial till is probably one of the reasons why people are coming back to that location over and over again as well, because they knew they could get something there for making stone tools. So it's not mining in the sense that we talk about today, but the rock was actually was one of the reasons why people were attracted there and came back to those locations. So in their senses of economy, it was important to their economy the same way that iron ore and that kind of stuff is important to our economy today. It's just a different way of being. I'm going through this stuff quite fast, so at the break time, if anybody wants to ask me any more detailed questions about it, feel free. Ramachurt is probably, at least in eastern North America, one of the most popular rocks in terms of an archaeological context and in terms of archaeologists recognizing it and getting excited by it. As you can see on the screen, it comes from the Torngat Mountains. It was used by virtually all the indigenous cultures who've inhabited Labrador by the time that they found it about 7,000 years ago, and it was used right up into the 1800s sort of thing, when it was replaced by metal objects, more than likely. The quarry today in the Torngat Mountains is now a National Historic Site of national significance. It's within the Torngat Mountain National Park. And as I said, it's been used for at least the last 7,000 years. There is one little bit of evidence that hints that may have been used longer, and that's this biface or spear point right here. This is actually a spear point. The form that it's in is what archaeologists refer to as Clovis style. It means that it's fluted from the base up. So people have knocked chips off it from the bottom towards the center, and what it does is it creates these channels going up it. This is a North American invention. We don't find it anywhere else in the archaeological record except for in the United States. First found on a site in Clovis, New Mexico, which is where you get that Clovis name from. This style of stone tool is used for, around 10,000 years ago. You find them in Deberton, Nova Scotia, and then it kind of disappears and doesn't get used anymore. This biface is made out of Ramachurt. It's been chemically analyzed and been shown to be the same rock from the Torngat Mountains, except it comes from a private collection in Vermont. And at the time, this 10,000 years ago, most, of course, of eastern North America was still covered, or at least in Canada, was still covered by ice. But you can see on this glacial map anyway that the Torngat Mountains, where the red arrow is, actually wasn't glaciated at this point in time. And there was actually a good part of the coast which was free as well. So it's possible that people were up in northern Labrador 10,000 years ago, but that's the only one piece of evidence that we have for that. And so it has to be taken with a grain of salt, especially because it comes from a private collection that a farmer has in Vermont. So it's possible that it's a plant. Somebody could have made it in the style of 10,000-year-old artifacts to kind of screw with archaeologists' minds and that sort of thing. Or the other possibility is that it actually is a 10,000-year-old artifact. The farm, coincidentally, where it does come from, sits on the shoreline of glacial Lake Champlain, which was a lake at 10,000 years ago, connected to the St. Lawrence estuary, which actually you could have had access to marine animals and all that sort of stuff. Other things about Ramachurt is that it seems to have some sort of, it's really good for making stone tools for one thing. It has really good flaking qualities and characteristics, but it also seems to have some other importance to it, because we find it, people are making great effort to find it, but it's also been found in archaeological sites all over eastern North America. So now, last year, or maybe 2 years ago, there was a biface found at Lake Simcoe in Ontario. So that's quite far west, and it's now been chemically proven to exist as far south as Florida. The only place we know this rock comes from is the Torngat Mountains. It's possible there's ice-rafted boulders and that sort of things that were caught up in glaciers and got deposited in other locations. but as far as we know, it comes from northern Labrador and was being traded extensively all over eastern North America, particularly between about 4,500 and 3,500 years ago, and then around the kind of 1,800 to 1,400 years ago or so, in those time frames. It's almost like people were wanted it in Labrador, on the coast of Labrador. It's almost exclusively used in those archaeological sites from 1,800 years ago till about 1,000 years ago or so. It makes really nice bifaces or spear points. This bottom one here is about a 7,000-year-old spear point. Nice big one. The other thing was we find it in caches or piles, so stone tools that have been particularly placed in a spot. Why, we don't know. This one comes from the Quebec North Shore. There were something like 37 of these bifaces, great big spear points, that had been left there and kind of piled up like that. Jim Tuck, an archaeologist at MUN, who's retired now, he actually proposed that it may have been a lithophone, so a kind of like a xylophone, but made bifaces in different shapes, and when you hit them, it actually does give you different notes. So that's a possibility. The other possibility is that somebody made all these biface blanks that they were going to come back and get at a later time, and they never made it back, or maybe they're territorial markers, or maybe there's some spiritual significance to it as well. We don't know. That's the fun part about archaeology, is we find this evidence and we get to make up stories about it, based on data and scientific investigation, that sort of thing. But that's what we do, is we're storytellers. The other thing about it is its appearance. And so today, if you see it, it actually kind of looks like the ice that you find like on your mud flaps on your car in the wintertime when they get the ice and the salt and stuff mixed into it. But it also does look like some glacial ice as well. And that could be significant because over a long period of its use, glaciers still exist on the landscape in eastern Canada and are slowly disappearing. So maybe the use of ramachurt was kind of a way to try and mitigate that or to deal with that. But also, my Innu colleagues tell me that in some cases, it looks like the back fat strip that's on the back of a caribou. The Torngat Mountains is the home of the caribou master in kind of Innu spiritual beliefs. That's where the being that controls caribou lives. And so maybe there's some significance to it that way as well. Maybe it has something to do with the importance of caribou and the location of the Torngat Mountains being the home of the caribou master. Labrador trough chert. So this will be the last thing I talk about. So the Labrador trough contains chert. In addition to the iron ore that everybody here knows about, it occurs in outcrops and cobbles from north of Shefferville. Oh no, I lost the rest of my sentence. Down to about Maniac anyway. Kind of around where some of those confluences come into the western shore of Maniac Lake. I should point out too that I refer to this stuff as chert. Ramachurt has recently been shown by Dr. Wilton at MUN. He believes it's chert, but oftentimes archaeologists take all these rocks that are similar to chert, like fellsites and all these other things that have the same flaking qualities and that kind of stuff, and we just call them chert. So geologists often get mad at us because it's not proper classification, but for talks like this and stuff, it certainly simplifies things a lot. But areas like around the Seal Lake and that sort of thing are other places in Labrador where we think some of this material comes from, but this stuff that you see on the screen is particularly from up by, on Maniac Lake, up by where Clark Lake Outlet and McFadden River and those places are. It's found both in outcrop forms, so forms like this one here on your left-hand side, but can also be found in cobble forms as well in the glacial till. Some of the defining characteristics of it are that it has, you can sort of see it on this slide, all these kind of little inclusions. All these little white specks in it, but it's often kind of rust stained as well from being in the Labrador trough. As everybody knows, it's been up that way. Is that a lot of the stuff has these staining on it. But in western Labrador, it is used quite extensively. We find it on lots of archaeological sites associated with Schwanapie, the Schwanapie Lake, and north on Maniac and those places. But it's also been found on the Quebec North Shore. It's been found up by Kuujjuaq, and it's actually a rock that hasn't been studied nearly as extensively as Ramachurt has. So it's possible that it's more widely distributed than that, but it's certainly kind of used in this central kind of the trough region quite extensively, at least from about 2,000 years ago up until kind of 1,800 years ago. But I suspect that it was used longer than that after the area became deglaciated. But so far there hasn't been a lot of investigation to kind of look for that. I think there's one site up on Maniac Lake that dates to around 3,000 years ago, or at least through proxy evidence dates to around 3,000 years ago. But it's a good quality. Well, it varies from really kind of cruddy rock to really good stuff that you can make, like this large cobble that you see right here. This is actually a giant flake. So it's got a huge bubble percussion on the end of it, where someone smashed it with another great big rock to kind of knock it off of the outcrop that it was on. And they would have, I found it up there, but the person, why they left it behind, I'm not sure. But that's the type, it would be kind of carried away in big chunks like that, either in a canoe or in a bag, and then used over a long period of time to eventually make spear points and knives and things like that out of it. So it takes some effort to find the better quality, like whereas the Ramachurt, for example, you walk into the quarry bowl at Rama Bay and there's just loads of this really good quality rock. In Maniac, you would have to put in a lot more effort in to find the good quality rock, but it is there, and that's probably one of the reasons why the Innu are using this area quite extensively. At least as soon as the ice was gone, we started to find people moving into central Labrador, or into western Labrador, Western Labrador and eastern Quebec, this kind of trough region, and then are here pretty much all the way up through till today. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, but I'm just going to end by mentioning that tomorrow night, actually, I did my PhD research at Ashwaubenon Lake. So I spent 3 years doing field work at Ashwaubenon. So tomorrow night at the Gateway Museum at 7, I'll be giving a much longer and more detailed talk, specifically about the research I did at Ashwaubenon. I've got some of the artifacts with me to show people, and I'll talk about the field work and can certainly answer any questions and things like that people have about the culture, history, and the archaeology of the region. And I just want to end by saying thanks to Karen for putting this on, and Labrador Institute for bringing me over here, and the College of North Atlantic, Rio Tinto IOC, and the Labrador West Heritage Society, who all were co-sponsors of this.
Thanks, Scott. I wasn't kidding when I said he was passionate about his work. He loves it.
You got to talk fast to get going.
Our next presentation is going to be another Scott, Mr. Scott Barney from IOC, and he is originally from Labrador. He's been living and working in Labrador City for close to 5 years with his wife Kelly, who's here with me tonight, and his children Haley and Noah. He began his career at IOC as a business improvement advisor, and he went on to become manager of mine maintenance and ODS, and currently holds the position of general manager, integrated mining operations. Prior to coming to IOC, Scott worked in the food industry in St. John's, Newfoundland, and also worked in the automotive industry in Kitchener, Ontario. All yours.
So you can call me Mr. I don't have a doctorate. Okay. Thank you. Evening, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to start by saying on behalf of the IOC Senior Leadership Team, I want to thank you for inviting us here today to be partners in this event. Sorry if I'm speaking too low, I'll try to speak up. So having the blast in Labrador West. This highlights National Mining Week. I'm going to actually, am I standing in the way here? Can everyone see this? Or, should I stand over here? All right. This highlights National Mining Week, as well as the great work that has been done by the Labrador Institute. No, I can't click the.
Yeah, here's the go back.
Well, Jeanette did such a great job on PowerPoint. I don't want you to be standing in the way of it. So before I get started, I want to start off with a safety share. Priority one at IOC is safety, and we always start our meetings, we always start our sessions with a safety share. And I thought it was very applicable that I shared with the spring and summer coming up. We all know from our experience 2 years ago the vulnerability and the impact that fires can have on Lab West. We saw last year the impact the fires that forest fires can have on that the forest fires had on Fort Mac. So this is a share for everyone, not just IOCC employees. A wildfire can occur without notice, and the time to plan an emergency is now. Take a few minutes to discuss with your family the actions you'll take in case of a wildfire evacuation. Create a landscape around your home and or cabin that's less vulnerable to fire. So 3 things you can do: know the local risks, create an emergency plan, and get an emergency kit ready. We may not have the wet summer this year we had last year, so it's always good to be prepared. Red Cross site, redcross.ca, has a really good website. It outlines a lot of things you should do to be prepared for a potential wildlife fire. So to get started, I have a quick video here. I think it connects well with the theme of today's event, having a blast in Lab West. Pardon the pun, but we have a blast at IOC just about every week. So this is I think it was the largest blast IOC ever had. I think it was around 5 million tons. So I thought it would be great to show it.
Oh.
So Scott, we've created some rock for you. Lots of it, 5 million tons worth, I think it was. All right, that's good. So over the past year, IOC has spent a lot of time. I'm going to go through a few slides here. We'll talk about IOC's vision and strategy. We'll talk about our operations, our processes, our products, and we'll talk about our people and just where the business is going, going in the future. IOC leadership has spent a lot of time over the last year focusing on our vision and strategy. For those who have been connected to Lab City, particularly in the mining industry, the last few years have tested IOC's ability very strongly to withstand some of the most challenging market conditions we have seen in our history. Due to that, we were forced to make some very difficult decisions in the business. But I believe today, and I think everyone would agree today, we are a stronger, more reliable business as a result of those decisions and the efforts of our employee and our community partners. Not to say all the work is done, still have a lot of work to do, and our journey for long-term sustainability is far from complete. At the heart of our strategy in 2017, it actually came down and was actually adopted by IOC through our Rio Tinto corporate, was to focus our strategy on 5 key areas. And the first is always in IOC, and always in Rio Tinto, is to place our primary focus on the health and safety of our employees. Secondly, is to engage and develop our people. Third, generate cash and operate commercial excellence. Create and sustain partnerships with our stakeholders, community, government, the government agencies, Lab City, folks in this room, allowing us to grow and reach our full potential. So those are the 5 key areas that the senior leadership team at IOC has been focusing our efforts around from 2017 going forward. I want to make 2 comments from this list. Strengthening our safety culture is an ongoing journey. It's a priority for IOC, and it's the most critical step in learning from the past and building a safer, healthier workplace for the future. And another key focus this year is to build a stronger engagement with our employees. We're doing that in 3 ways. We're doing that by being better listeners, listening to our employees' views and their ideas, recognizing effort and achievement. So if you're not just you've done a bad job, you've done a good job, thank you, and developing people to their potential. So really putting a focus on recruiting talent and supporting the talent in the business. Underpinning these priorities is a set of values that you see on the bottom, drives the behavior that will and should drive the behaviors of every employee in IOC. Those are safety, teamwork, respect, integrity, and excellence. I think those feed we're willing to drive our strategy. Our vision for IOC, and it's actually come down, I think, in the last maybe 6 to 8 months, with our new CEO and our new chief executive. IOC's vision is to be a premier mining organization in North America. And I think through this strategy and our values, we can achieve that. So, some of you have probably seen this. I know the guys in the back from Mine Tech Services have probably seen this a dozen times, but this is the iron ore price index of what we call Platts 62% iron index. It basically trends and tells you the commodity market price for iron ore. And the reason why this is so important for IOC to track is because we are competing in a global market. Okay, so we don't get special special treatment for our iron ore. So our big mine of 23 million tons of concentrate in Lab West is a very, very small piece of the approximately 1 billion annual tons of iron ore, seaborne iron ore that gets shipped every year. So we are big here, but so these prices have a huge impact on us. If you look at the global commodity markets, I think people from Lab West would remember the days when iron ore was $150, $160 a ton. I think it was, heyday, right? Somewhere in the 2016s, we can see the price, the commodity market really dropped. And if you were to overlay this commodity market on copper, if you were to overlay this commodity market on aluminum, even on oil and gas, you probably see a very, very similar trend. Around mid-year 2016, we're getting down below $40 a ton. The good news is China has injected some stimulus into its economy. Back here during the 2016, when we hit below $40 a ton, there's some very, 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 very tough times. Back in this time frame is when Wabash Mines closed up. We saw Bloom Lake leave the region. ArcelorMittal stayed, and so did IOC. So this year, for first quarter, we've seen the result of that stimulus in China. Prices have rose back up around, in the first part of the year was around $90 a ton. We've seen that stabilize off now about $60 to $65 a ton. The long-term forecast will never get us back here again. That's why you'll see me talk a little bit more about why our people and our productivity is so important. We cannot depend on the mining industry in Lab West on $140, $150 a ton to bring us prosperity anymore. Long-term forecast, there will not be another China boom. That's over. China's economy continues to grow, but it won't grow at the same pace it grew back when we saw these very, very high prices. So, all right, our community. IOC operates in two communities. Obviously, Lab City, where it operates a mine and a processing facility. It also operates in a very, very substantial presence in Sept-Îles, Quebec, where it operates a real port operation. So what's a little bit unique about IOC is we're a fully integrated operation. We cover an area 450 kilometers from Lab City all the way to the ports. So we recognize that it took a lot of foresight. I think there's a plaque on the wall here that says the first ore car shipped May 2nd, 1962. I think or May 12th, 1962. That's a long time ago. I wasn't born then. So it took a lot of pioneer for someone to move. I mean, this looks great now because it's all laid out. I can imagine in 1962 what it looked like. You know, it's probably look like up in the back of a ship. So it looked like up in the back of some lake somewhere, right? But someone came here, built a mine, built a community, you know, this is a vibrant community filled with many activities for pretty young and old, and the community, both Lab City and Satill, never lose sight of the importance of partnership and sustainability. IOC is proud of its strong community partnerships, and have been built on the foundation of mutual respect and collaboration to advance common priorities. Since 2006, our partnerships have included a community advisory panel, and in 2012, I think IOC initiated a regional task force to strengthen our partnership with our local communities, the region, and government agencies. So, you know, hoping to be a presence in both these communities for another 50 years, at least. So I'm going to go into, I won't go through this, you know, in real detail, but I thought it was, but I thought it might be interesting to show you how the IOC process works at a very high level. Most people who are not familiar into mining think it's just a mine. IOC is much more than just a mine. So I'll walk you through it. Everything in IOC starts in the mine. We drill holes. We have 10 rotary production drills that drill holes in the ground. They're 12-inch diameter, and how deep? Test. Quiz for the IOC Tech Services guys. 15.2. 15.2 meters down. So once all these holes are drilled, we'll drill off a huge pattern, and you saw in the blast. Those blast holes are filled with emulsion or AMFO. We use the Orica's Icon electronic detonation system, and we block the rock. So we basically taking the bedrock, fragmenting it to a size that can be dug. From there, we have 5 P&H 2800 rope shovels, very large dig units. We have 2 production loaders that actually dig this broken waste and ore from the ground. They load it into one of our 29 Komatsu haul trucks, and those haul trucks. So it's a very simplistic way of showing the flow, but generally that's how our mine works, and we do that at a capacity rate of 100 million tons a year. So it's not a little piece of iron ore is not worth much, but when you move 55 million tons of it a year, or it certainly has value. From our mine, we use our ore delivery system to move that primary ore from our mine to our concentrator. We have 2 ways of doing that. We use an automated train system. We have 7 automatic train lines that run the 7-kilometer distance for the 8-kilometer distance from the mine to our processing plant. And during the expansion of 2010, the secondary process was installed, which we call our Crusher 305. This is our parallel ore delivery system, which uses a 7-kilometer conveyor belt to deliver the ore that's mined to our processing plant. Once in the processing plant, we produce 2 things. We produce concentrate and we produce pellets. So we have a concentrator and we have a pellet plant. Concentrator basically takes the primary ore, which includes waste, and it refines it through a grinding system and three basic recovery plants, and it actually breaks that primary ore down and delivers a concentrate that's at about 65 to 66% iron. So very high quality iron. You saw on the previous pricing chart that the pricing is based on a 62% iron content. We're fortunate here in IOC to have a slightly higher quality iron concentrate. So about half of our concentrate is sold as what we call CFS, concentrate for sinter. So it's actually sold directly into the market to be burnt in blast furnaces to create steel. The other half of that, and this is where IOC is again very fortunate, goes to our pellet plant, where we turn that concentrate into a very high quality pellet. which again gets shipped into very, very specific markets in North America and Europe to create steel in non-blast furnace applications. Then we move it down the line. We have a train loading system here in Lab City. The QNS&L rail line has about 60 locomotives. They move about 35 million tons of ore a year, about 450 kilometers, I think it is, from Lab City down to Sept-Îles. Once in Sept-Îles, it gets dumped. It gets stacked in huge piles. If anybody's ever flown over Sept-Îles, right by the shoreline, you'll see these huge A-shaped piles. That's the concentrated pellets from Lab City. Once we have ships in the harbor, there's huge reclaimers that will actually reclaim the ore off the ground, feed belting systems, and actually load ships. On an average basis, we'll load about 200 vessels out of Sept-Îles each year. Some of those are large ocean freighters, and some of them are what we call Laker ships. So that's our process. From all of that, and I touched on it earlier, we produce two products. We produce a pellet and we produce a concentrate. What I guess sets IOC a little bit apart from our competitors, especially in Brazil and Western Australia, is our ore body is very naturally clean. I hope I'm saying the right things, geologists in the back there, so correct me if I'm wrong. Our product has one of the industry lowest aluminum and phosphorus contents, which makes our product very, very attractive. This attribute of low impurities makes our pellet concentrate an excellent complement to lump ore and fines from our sister operation in Western Australia. So not only does it create a very, very high quality pellet, we're able to ship our concentrate for center to blend with a much lower quality product, even though it's much higher volume, much lower quality product out of Western Australia. As a result of continued product development, investment in production systems, we're able to diversify our product offering. So today we're positioned to meet the product demand of virtually every blast furnace operator, and we're also continuing to build our customer base on what we call DR pellets, which is direct reduction pellets, which is the highest quality, highest value product we could make at IOC. Okay, I'm going to touch on this because it's about where IOC is going in the future. What's shown here is a picture of our new operations center. So in 2012, IOC launched what we call our operations center pilot. We have a pilot here in Lab City, and we have a pilot in Sept-Îles. The operations center pilot has proven very effective in providing a shared picture and coordinated approach of the entire value stream. So basically what this does, it's a remote overview of the entire value stream. Whereas in the past, we would mine and we would deliver the ore and we would concentrate the ore. We now have a team whose focus is to identify non-value-added activities across the value stream, and they can pinpoint in real time when problems are occurring, whether it be in the mine or whether it be 400 kilometers away in Sept-Îles, and very, very quickly make adjustments. So we don't lose 8 hours of production loss or 12 hours. Very, very quick in that way. What I would say is that the resource sector is evolving rapidly through technology and innovation. Rio Tinto now has fleets of autonomous haul trucks. They have fleets of semi-autonomous drills. So when I say autonomous haul trucks, there are mines in the Pilbara owned by Rio Tinto where they have 30 or 40 of these haul trucks who are not manned anymore. They're completely guided by GPS, and they run the mine day after day after day autonomously. So what that tells IOC is that we cannot compete on the global market if we stay stagnant where we are. And this is IOC's first step into really opening up technology and innovation to help our business be more productive. Walbridge 3, anyone know what Walbridge 3 is? So part of growing for our future is Walbridge 3. IOC and Rio Tinto, just a few months ago, we're very pleased to announce the investment to proceed with Walbridge 3. Walbridge 3 is our latest, our newest open pit mine. It's for anybody who kind of knows where it is. It's actually located behind the ski hill. This new mine was a huge step forward for IOC. I think it's a fairly large investment, but it's actually providing life of mine increase. So it's going to increase our mine life by, I think, somewhere between 7 and 12 years, and it's going to provide us much needed ore volume to meet our concentrate demands of 23 plus 1 million tons a year. So it's quite exciting for IOC. I think it's quite exciting for the region to see that even coming out of 2016, where we had a very challenging year. The following year, Rio Tinto and its board of directors of IOC had the confidence in the business, confidence in the region to invest a significant amount of money in opening up a new mine, and this certainly ensures product volume, but it also ensures continuing partnership in the region and continuing employment both in Lab City and in Tinto for many years to come. Finally, just talking about a sustainable future, what a sustainable future looks like for IOC. Our future at IOC, being sustainable, is very dependent on our ability to stabilize the business and consistently meet our production plan. What IOC has done over the last number of years is we've really increased our credibility as a partially owned entity of Rio Tinto. We've certainly increased our credibility with Rio Tinto globally. Some of the things we have to continue to do well. Total cost reduction, productivity must continue to significantly improve. What I talked about earlier, the iron ore industry never going back to $120, $130, $140 a ton. Our path forward has to be based on removing as much non-value added activity as we can and being a very productive mine. And last but not least, ongoing engagement with our employees and our external stakeholders certainly remain a priority for IOC. Was I within 15 minutes? Do we have time for questions, or will I just close it? Anybody have any questions? Wow. Cesar, you must have a question. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Scott and Krista. I just wanted to say I neglected to introduce one of our Labrador Institute members who's over here joining us, Dr. Ron Sparks. So I completely neglected to mention you're over there. He's our Labrador associate and definitely a wealth of information for us at Labrador Institute. He's been in the post-secondary education environment for a number of years, and he's a go-to guy. He knows all the answers. Thanks. Right now we're going to break for a perfect timing, guys. Just in time for lunch.
There's always a time for food.
Always. We're just gonna break for a quick refreshment break, so you probably take about 15 minutes. Just a reminder, if you haven't already done so, to fill out a little ballot and drop it in the bag there. We're gonna have a draw at the end of the evening for some wonderful Labrador Institute prizes. And we want to thank IOC for sponsoring the lovely refreshments we're about to have. Enjoy, and we'll be back in just
She came in after I can ask. I know a lot. Great systems. I got that picture too. Sure, I took that picture.
That was like touching on really interesting.
I'll talk specifically about it.
Matt can't wait.
Yeah. Yeah, came rushing back.
Memories.
I don't remember it much of the trial for sure.
Really good at any of them.
I'm sure it's
Because you go either way. It was planned, it was actually legitimate. It was legitimate that it was a huge building. It's a film next, yeah, and I went into that.
Yeah. I'm scared with that.
You won't have rocks. Oh, that's scary. Lots of Wabush samples. How's it going? I'll see you again. Oh my God. Wanted to be here to. You missed Dr. Nielsen's thing, so you're going to have to come tomorrow night now and then see the bigger presentation. Where are you going? We're in the building inside the road. On the inside, yeah. You said there were a lot, but did you last time there?
Try it and see. Lightens it up.
We're showing a film next, so I'll drawing down for that.
Yeah. But I think you can see better if the lights are down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
much better.
Much better.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
There you go. You're gonna walk in and catch the presentation. Is this your other? Yeah, you can have it. Is it like a business overview or what do you do?
Just a very a little bit of Wabush 3 yeah, but it's not wrong with that's the archaeology presentation. And that I can't eat it.
What are you doing? Hungry?
No, we were home. We already had something to eat. Evenings are so good.
We came right after we're finished, so.
Oh, man. Well, it looks like it'll be done early.
That's good. I'm just like dreading like having to pack up all this rocks.
Oh, those all your own rocks? Oh, yeah?
It's my personal collection with a few thrown in for miles.
Oh, that's awful.
So
These are what got driven up from home.
some of them, yeah. Driven back
First, it shows up my office, it demands a screen and a bunch of shit selling in this other office. That shit never comes to use.
Thursday.
I had it done like that day, I don't even know.
Thursday. I'm allowed to come Thursday.
Oh.
Yeah.
just have the one set up for now.
Oh, that's good.
Around here, so.
That means no one else is bothering me.
Perfect. You ready? You nervous?
I'm nervous.
You got time?
I get nervous.
This office will
Start
have,
shaking his leg while he's up here.
That's right.
Yep.
this new office will have 100% less asbestos.
Really? That would be good.
My current office
Might be
has
healthy.
and it's like stuck in the walls, but my wall is like peeling and flaking off because of the water damage, and it like blows onto my desk when it's good because the window seals are so good.
Maybe you should talk to the health and safety folks about that and have them
Is it
quarantine your freaking office.
There's notifications. Maintenance is
Yeah, but the one engineering building wasn't built. That would have been built.
Yeah, all the
There's
drywall plaster.
stickers like.
Yeah,
Do not disturb the drywall.
It's only unfortunate that mine is crumbling, so it is disturbed.
Disturbed.
Good out there.
I'm good. I'm just got here.
into this. Kind of went into that again. Somebody's using this but
Okay.
and then it's back, so it's forward and back.
Just cover it. And if anybody wants anything out of the box, or say, so you just cover it, I guess. Cover it. Yeah. I don't even know if she's pick it up. Cover it, and then we can cover it right before the end. And if anybody wants anything else, then yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I think our.
Well, I don't feel so bad.
I know, I was like,
Eight a few minutes ago before I came.
the woman there was like, would you like dessert? I was like, no, I feel that I'll eat again very soon. So,
I was complaining about having eaten too much.
me too, it's just when it's there, I'm bad like that if it's there.
Yeah, that's true too. What's the sauerkraut?
Caitlin, are you usually called Kate? Should we be called Kate?
I'm called either, actually. I find my friends
I gotta
growing
still
up
do it. I'm
is
like,
Caitlin, and my friends I've met since university is
I
Caitlin.
never got the letter right.
Either.
It was on the old
Whatever you're
sorry,
comfortable with. I've never, my aunt's called Liz, so I've never responded to that, but I could. If you really want to go that way.
Too easy. Surely.
Not long for
Most of the times it's like, my little sister used to call me Katie growing up, but she stopped and she's now dating Katie, so that's kind of So, yeah. They got the French names and I got the English one, Mr. Grassi. Thanks, Mom.
You never just French.
My dad was French, so he spoke to us in French. We responded in English quite stubbornly. We've been in French for years since I was in university. So, and my undergrad was bilingual. And so, I did a lot of my university in French, which was really hard. But yeah, but yeah. So if I should have responded in French, but I didn't. Yeah.
Can everybody remember to enter their name for a draw at the end of the evening? Who said no? Of course. You can do that at the end. Yeah. We'll give you an opportunity to stick your name in. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is a film screening, and I'm going to have Morgan Mills, my colleague with the Labrador Institute in Happy Valley Coos Bay, to come forward in a moment. He'll tell you a little bit about the film he's going to show, and I think he's going to talk a little bit about the LI Library and Archive. Just going to introduce him now before he comes up. Morgan Mills joined Memorial University in January 2010, and he's been a program coordinator at the Labrador Institute since May 2012. He administers the library and archive and delivers projects in research, education, and engagement, and supports the Labrador Institute program and staff and partners. Morgan has some teaching duties as well, and is the Labrador Regional Coordinator for Resources and Sustainable Development in the Arctic, and was previously Skills Development Coordinator for Memorial's Inuit Bachelor of Social Work program. Morgan holds a Bachelor of Arts honors and a Master of Arts, Bachelor of Arts and a Master of Arts, that's what I said, yeah. Both from the University of Toronto. He has completed the certificate in library studies from Memorial University, and he's currently a PhD student in the Department of English. His research focus is on the production, propagation, and reception of Labrador texts. And we're going to have Morgan up.
Thank you. So I don't have a huge amount to say. I'm just going to show a film here. Just briefly mention about the library. We've got a library and an archive over in Goose Bay, co-located with the college library there. And we try to do a few initiatives having to do with film. Some of them you can see online. We've got a series of Labrador Heritage Minutes that are 1 minute long. Basically, I shamelessly ripped off the Canada Historica Minutes. So there's one about Trans-Labrador Highway. There's some shots of Lab City in that one. There's one on mining. There's a few others just sort of around the region generally. It might be worth checking out there on our YouTube channel. And but apart from that, things that you can access generally, I'm very happy to share anything that we've got in our archive electronically, and also potentially we share things back and forth between the different libraries. So if our catalogs online, finding aids are online, you can reach out to me or just look through our website and see what we've got available. And if you go to Haley over here at the campus library here, we can share things back and forth pretty easily. So either through the college system or contact me directly either way. But I guess I'll just introduce the short film I'm going to show here. Scott Barty mentioned a few minutes ago the long history and foresight of the early prospectors, planners, and investors and so on behind IOC. And here's a video that will showcase some of that, called Ore in 54. So talking about the first shipments of ore in that year. There's also another great one about called Up the Line in 53, which is the construction of the QNSNL railway the year before, which is good too. So the video is commissioned by IOC and produced by Cinecraft in 1954. About 29 seconds of a long beat. Is it loud or is it
This is a churn drill, working on a solid hill of iron ore on the Quebec-Labrador border. It marks the final chapter of a long story covering 4 years of effort, the labor of thousands of men, and the expenditure of $250 million. A story that is the basis of this report on what we had to do to get ore in ore. Start with the land. Lonely, vast, and remote. It's been neglected for centuries. But locked in that lake-studded plateau are tremendous mineral treasures. Getting them out meant breaking down this land's age-old defenses of climate and terrain. It meant breaking through the protecting wall of 100 miles of Laurentian uplands. And it meant fighting and winning the endless war with distance. Only a map can make this clear and thus underline the constant limitations geography imposed. Work started at the old fishing village of Sept-Îles on the north shore of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Montreal, 484 air miles away. Montjoly on the south shore, the nearest railroad point, 141 air miles away. The ore bodies themselves are north around Knob Lake. Here, a new town site named Shefferville is being built. A 357-mile railway was built from the Gulf of St. Lawrence to the ore bodies. Come back now 4 years to Sept-Îles as we retrace what had to be done to get out ore. The centuries have gone slowly for Sept-Îles. Each finding it is the last neglected. A quiet fishing village on the edge of the wilderness. But that changed at the midpoint of this century of destiny, making Sept-Îles the gateway to one of the greatest mining ventures of all time. On October 2nd, 1950, the first bulldozers came ashore from a small St. Lawrence freighter and began knocking down brush back of the old village. They were opening the way for ore in 54. In the dock area, pile drivers started hammering down sheet piling of corrosion-resistant, copper-bearing steel as a fishing village took the first step toward its eventual position as a major seaport, which will ship millions of tons of ore each year. Out in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, a dredge pumped up tremendous quantities of sand and pushed it into the area behind the dock. We were making land here, building a firm base for the modern and massive equipment necessary to load the great vessels that would be calling. When enough ore started coming down in 54 to test facilities and train personnel. Sometimes the Gulf can act like a full-fledged ocean and its severely pounded temporary dock facilities, but never enough to stop the stream of supplies and equipment that came ashore to serve the expanding project. trucks needed up the line. Tank cars for fuel needed everywhere. Boxcars for supply trains bound up the line. Locomotives for the long haul north. Aggregate for concrete. And it wasn't always springtime in the harbor. Sometimes we sent ashore a load of ice as a bonus. And always heavy equipment for a big, heavy job. A lot of it was put to work preparing the foundations of what was to be the dumper house, the place where ore would eventually be transferred from railroad cars to conveyors which would load the waiting ships. Excavation for the foundation extended below the waterline. It was necessary to ring the pit with well points that kept carrying out water as fast as it could seep in. This work, as well as all the rest of the major construction on the project, was done by a combination of 4 contracting firms: Cartier, McNamara, Mannix, and Morrison Knudsen, known colloquially as CMMK. Iron Ore Company of Canada, which built the project, is made up of Hollinger Consolidated Gold Mines Limited, M.A. Hanna Company, and 5 steel companies: Armco, National, Republic, Wheeling, and Youngstown Sheet and Tube. They put up $100 million of the $250 million total cost. The rest will be lent by 19 American and Canadian insurance companies. Over on the Marguerite River, 24 miles away, other construction crews were busy erecting a dam and power project which would supply electricity to operate dock and terminal facilities and to serve the expanding town of Settee. In a construction project this size, you search for ways to use materials at hand. In this case, local rock was quarried just a few hundred yards from the dam site, hauled to an aggregate plant, crushed, washed, sized, sorted, and thus processed on the spot into aggregate suitable for the high-quality concrete needed for the job. The object of this construction is the eventual completion of a gigantic plug across the gorge of the Marguerite, bottling up all the water in a drainage area 3,500 square miles in extent and creating a lake 53 miles long. Specifically, there will be a dam 517 feet long, 128 feet high, containing 52,000 cubic yards of concrete. It'll be flanked by an earthen dam, 2,680 feet long. This was a project where everything had to be done at once. All the while we were building in Settee and at Marguerite, we were also pushing north. We were building in all places, in all directions at the same time. Fleets of heavy equipment were ready to push steel ahead, up the line. And as soon as rail was down, we sent trains north over it with yet more equipment for yet more construction, always increasing the tempo of the work. Daily, the trains pulled out of Settee to supply a construction battle that has few equals in history. The epic struggle to build the Quebec, North Shore, and Labrador Railway north to the ore body. 12 miles north of Settee, we had to cut a half-mile tunnel through Laurentian rock, and then immediately had to throw a 705-foot bridge across the deep gorge of the Moisey River. The south end of the bridge tied directly into the north portal of the tunnel, and the river is more than 150 feet straight down a sheer cliff. Building in these conditions is akin to pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. Steel and men inched their way across the chasm on an intricate web of cable. We crossed the Moisey in June 1952, but there was no let-up for the construction crews. On the other side of the bridge, there is rock. Mile after mile of it rising in sheer canyon walls. Drill crews sweated their heavy wagon drills up the cliff sides, fighting for every inch, toiling painfully over the bleak face of some of the oldest rock in the world. This was building a railroad the hard way, but there was no easy way to go north for the ore in Quebec, Labrador. Drill bits sank home thousands of times in the stretch between mile 12 and mile 17. In these 5 miles, we blasted down 1 million cubic yards of rock. And we built ourselves a roadbed. 1 million yards of rock and 600 tons of dynamite, and the trains kept moving north over the new rail, rolling toward the head of steel, toward the wilderness we had not yet reached. As soon as we cut new tunnels and laid new rail, northbound trains carried in supplies and equipment to the next stage of the job. Much of the freight they hauled was used to feed and house men working along the line. There were 18 major construction camps. At peak operations, they housed a total of 6,900 men, most of them Canadians coming from Quebec and Newfoundland. And as the rail went north, so did the wires. Steel-cored, aluminum-covered wires to tie together the modern centralized traffic control system, which guides the Quebec North Shore and Labrador Railway. There are 14 wooden trestles built in part of local lumber to supplement 5 steel bridges on the way north. Drainage was a constant problem. To solve it, we pierced the roadbed with 16.5 miles of culvert, ranging up to 12 feet in size. And nowhere was drainage more troublesome than in the muskeg, which begins north of the Laurentian uplands. A quagmire of rotting vegetation did stubbornly defies efforts to move it. Luckily, muskeg along the QNS&L was not the bottomless kind found elsewhere in North America. Here it averages 3 to 4 feet thick, and we put fill right over it, expecting it slowly to compress and compact enough to make a stable roadbed. As soon as we had a roadbed, we laid track over it. One shift ahead of the steel, we distributed ties so nothing would slow up the rail-laying crew. Cranes picked up rail from special skeleton cars and swung it into position. Good teamwork made it possible to lay one rail every 60 seconds. When all the rail on a skeleton car had been used, the crane lifted the car off the track, set it aside, and went to work on a fresh car. Then the crane would move forward over the new track and repeat the cycle. But machines alone didn't do the job. It also took tough and able men, drawn from every province in Canada. Men capable of working 10 and 12 hours a day to accomplish a job without close parallel in construction history. They did it during the winter of 1953 and 54 as we were driving to be ready to move ore. From December into February, they laid track in weather that went down to 50 degrees below zero and colder. This is weather that strains equipment to the utmost. Motors have to be running constantly, for if they freeze, they'll not start again until the next thaw. And some equipment will operate at only 50% efficiency. In December 1953, working out of the railway camp at mile 290, the track laying crews made more than 2 miles a day for 10 straight days. Going into Silver Lake Yards, in the heart of the ore district, they made 9,700 feet on the last day of track laying. The golden spike symbolizing the end of rail construction to Knob Lake was driven on February 13, 1954 by Jules R. Timmons, president of Hollinger Consolidated Gold Mines. It was rough, but track laid during that last drive down the home stretch made it possible to move ore in 54. Winter ballasting was even more precedent-shattering than winter track laying. Ballast that should have been frozen as hard as the steel side of a railroad car flowed easily at 40 below zero. Each particle seemed to be locked in its own little ice capsule. We took gravel for the winter operations from a gigantic glacial esker at mile 290. In the spring of 1954, we speeded track racing operations with a ballast sled. Pulled behind the locomotive, it raised track and spread ballast at the rate of 2 to 3 miles an hour, far faster than traditional methods, helping advance serviceable track for ballast trains and mechanical tapping operations. And all up and down the line, we searched constantly for new answers. There are 100 stories to tell about the means used to move men and supplies up the line to the site of construction. Stories about helicopters which make any region accessible. About the experimental swamp buggy we hoped would solve the problem of mudding. About the canoes that carried survey teams into the bush. About the beetle-like snowmobiles that were so valuable in the winter. About the fight to keep rail open in the snow season so that supply trains could move north. About the great convoys of 1952 and 1953 that traveled for 10 weeks across the frozen bush and ice-bound lakes with heavy supplies and equipment for spring work up the line. About the little 44-foot boats we built on the project. They hauled more than 150,000 tons in 1953. But the greatest story of all was the airlift. The story of the Hollinger-Ungava Transport Company. Always overhead there was the sound of a plane, the constant background to the fight for ore. For 3 years, there never was a period of more than 48 hours without a flight. Around the clock and around the calendar, the planes took off. From October 1950 until December 1953, Hollinger-Ungava missed only a total of 11 days, not counting Christmas and New Year's Day. This in a region which is the home of some of the world's worst flying weather. Every man, every machine, every pound of fuel used up the line had to go at least part of the way by airlift. The airline was based at Montjoly, on the railroad on the south shore of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. 141 miles to the northeast is Sept-Îles, its next port of call. From there north, 320 air miles to Knob Lake is wilderness. In its 3 years of peak operation, the airline flew nearly 139,000 passengers, 170 million pounds of freight, totaling 15 million ton miles over this country without scratching a crewman or a passenger. The record was made possible by skilled pilots, many of them RCAF veterans, backed by top flight organization, planning, maintenance, and weather information. At the peak, 82 pilots and co-pilots were flying 18 aircraft maintained by 100 mechanics. There were 14 landing strips up the line, many of them just single runways, bulldozed out of the bottom of narrow canyons along the railroad right-of-way. Aircraft were equipped with crosswind landing gear to overcome the handicaps imposed by landing strip locations and the ever-present menace of tricky crosswinds whirling through the deep valleys. Hollinger-Ungava Transport made history in this struggle to get ore. Building Manahek Dam is an example of the sort of job HUT did. Here it blew in almost all materials, including a total of 190,000 bags of cement and 7,000 gallons of gasoline a day. Manahek was a place of heartbreak. We built first a temporary copper dam and bridge, only to see the spring of 1952 bring an unprecedented breakup and runoff which washed out months of hard work. One major handicap in all construction work was the lack of accurate runoff data in this wilderness area. Here again, we crushed local rock to make aggregate for the 31,000 cubic yards of concrete we needed. The rock around Benihek posed a special problem. It was so full of panic acid that we had to wash it to turn out a suitable material. Winter is hard in this country, but at least in winter you can stay on top of the ground. Men and machines can move. But the spring runoff, followed by the thawing of several feet of ground frost, produces a thin, hard-to-handle mud. It's hard to move it out of the way, and anything caught in it shows a strong tendency to sink out of sight. This is a land of extremes, and each season brought its own problems to the men who were pushing to get ore. 900,000 cubic yards of earth had to be moved at Benihek, and they were far from being the easiest 900,000 of the project. But the builders persisted, making concrete from acid rock, moving and pouring it winter and summer to raise the face of a 517-foot long dam, which will also serve as a bridge over the Benihek to carry the railroad north to the ore bodies 30 miles away. Burnt Creek was the first settlement in the ore country, but it's now known to sit on 10 million tons of ore, and will be torn down to make way for the shovels. The first tote roads in the bush fanned out over the hills from Burnt Creek. They led back to drilling teams whose rigs, supported by tripods of native spruce poles, probed the depth and extent of Quebec Labrador deposits, probing 417 million long tons of direct shipping iron ore. Nearby Knob Lake, named for the promontory in the background, was the site of a seaplane base. The new town of Shepherdsville will be built on this site. By the spring of 1954, bulldozers were clearing the way for railroad spurs past the ore bodies. Spurs which will carry some of the first ore to be shipped south. They tie into the main line of the QN-SNL at Silver Lake Yards, outside Knob Lake. Communications men followed close behind, stringing the wires which will link the whole vast project together. A land lonely and lifeless for centuries has come awake. The roads straggling through the bush do little to change the essential emptiness of the ore country, but they are roads, men do move over them, and the face of a land that has not changed since the last glacier is changing now. A crushing plant and loading pocket rise against a gray-green hill. On one side of the valley is civilization, on the other, the timeless north. The big shovels bite into the thin overburden, seldom more than 7 to 10 feet thick, that lies across the beds of rich ore. This stripping compares with the more than 250 feet necessary on some of the deposits remaining in the Great Lakes Superior Ranges. Once the overburden is removed, shovels will scoop out and load ore in the same way. 20 million tons of ore already stripped lies under this churn drill, which is sinking blasting holes to loosen ore for the shovels. Some of the first ore shipped will come from this deposit. Is cut into a solid hill of ore. Huge 6-yard electric shovels, each representing $250,000, will move ponderously down it, dipping their heads to fight into a face of weathered earth that runs nearly 60% iron. This is what we came for. This is why we built 2 towns, 2 power projects, and a railroad. This is ore to feed the free world's blast furnaces, and we're ready for it down the line. Benihek is ready now. An earth and concrete barrier across a chain of northern waters draining 9,000 square miles. It generates 12,000 horsepower and can easily be expanded to twice that. Expansion to 50,000 horsepower is possible with additional construction. And when the spring thaws come from now on, they'll find us ready. They won in 1952, but in 54 and the ore-filled years ahead, the picture will look just a little different. Water that for centuries ran wasted to the sea has been dammed and is falling 115 feet to give us the power we need in the terminal area, falling to turn two 12,500 horsepower generators. We're sending 44,000 volts up the hill and around the bay to Sept-Îles. And when the power reaches Sept-Îles, we're ready for it there too, ready to put it to work. The dock is completed, jutting into 37 feet of water at low tide. Inland, the symmetrical arms of the ore stacker are spread to stockpile reserve ore. The small amount of ore to be handled in 54 will serve to test facilities and train personnel. Regular commercial production of ore is planned to start in 1955. In the background is the dumper house. It can turn over and empty 2 railroad cars, each carrying 85 tons of ore every 65 seconds. A belt conveyor system carries this ore to the 1,000-ton mixing bins, which feed it down another conveyor system along the dock, which loads waiting ships at a peak rate of 8,000 tons an hour. Most of the ore produced in the next few years will probably move by deep water vessels from Sept-Îles to Atlantic coast ports such as Philadelphia and Baltimore. It's 1,366 water miles to Philadelphia, 1,550 water miles to Baltimore. From 2 to 3 million tons a year will be shipped up the St. Lawrence to Montreal. Here it will be transferred to smaller Canadian vessels, which can negotiate present St. Lawrence canals and locks. These ships will carry ore to Ashtabula, Cleveland, and other traditional Great Lakes ore ports. Present Great Lakes carriers will be able to sail directly from Sept-Îles when the St. Lawrence Seaway is completed. It's 952 water miles from Sept-Îles to Ashtabula, only 76 more than from Duluth to Ashtabula. We're ready for ore in 54 and for increasing millions of tons of it when full commercial production gets underway. With the Sept-Îles facilities finished, dredges are at work on the St. Lawrence, 25 miles from Montreal, where we're building a great trans-shipping terminal. It's taken 4 years, $250 million, and thousands of men, but we are bringing out ore in 54.
Wasn't that fabulous? Oh yeah, well, wonderful thing. Thanks, Morgan, for getting that together for us. Next, I want to call on Mr. Jordan Brown, President of the Labrador Heritage Society, our local Height of Land branch, to introduce our next speaker and our next film screening.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. This is excellent. That was a great blast from the past. Anyway, I'm with the Labrador Heritage Society Height of Land branch. We're a group of local people who like to preserve and protect local heritage and culture of the region and share it with you. So events like this is great because we get to go out and share what we find and stuff like that. And our next film was that actually, it was kind of tricky to get it because the original copy is still locked away in Wabash Mines, as everyone knows the situation. It's under CCAA, so nothing comes out. But lucky enough, we found the local CBC archive actually had a copy. So we were able to find it and bring it here because of that. It shows a little bit of history of Wabash Mines and the interesting techniques to get people to live there. So that was great. I'd also like to thank everybody for helping organized this and that. Karen's been great, and Labrador Institute. Thanks IOC for coming, and it's great to do that. And I'd like to thank all of the members of the Heritage Society too, who help every day. It's great. And I'd like to thank Pat Moran for helping us too. He's a geologist, and he's going to be also speaking after the film that we're going to show. Actually, no, he's speaking before the film. Sorry. But anyway, he's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the role of rocks. I kind of glaze over a little bit, right? That's great. Anyway, so thanks and enjoy.
Maybe I'll just, yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name's Patrick Warren, and I'm a geologist working in the hydrogeology department at IOC, and I've been at IOC for almost 3 years now. And before that, I was a geologist working at Wabash Mines before it closed. And just a bit about my background, I went to university in Wolfville, Nova Scotia for an undergraduate degree in geology, and then did a master's degree focused on banded iron formation hosted gold deposits near Thunder Bay. And today I'm just going to give you an introduction to the geology of Labrador West and an introduction to what iron formation actually is. So here's a picture of a piece of banded iron formation, abbreviated as BIF, for the rest of the presentation. So when I say BIF, I mean banded iron formation. It's from Ontario, and it's dated to 2.7 billion years ago. And the dark gray layers are the iron oxide, and the red layers are actually chert. And off to the left, I have a map, a geographic map of Labrador, showing the Labrador Trough. And the trough is the major geologic feature of this area, and why those men did all that hard work back in, what year was it? And on this map, I just have some yellow stars. So those are locations of some of the samples that we have displayed out front. So the location and regional geologic setting. The Labrador Trough is, so this body here is actually the Labrador Trough, and it's about 1,100 kilometers long and between 2.3 and 1.8 billion years old. And it's part of the Canadian Shield. And the Canadian Shield is a part of very hard and old rock at the core of North America. And it's composed of tectonic provinces. And you can think of these provinces as former islands that were all squashed together. So the trough actually formed along the edge of one of these islands on a shallow water shelf setting similar to the modern day Grand Banks in Flint. Now I'm just going to walk through the depositional history of the trough through a transect, if you can see on the map there, from A to A prime, just south of Shefferville and north of Menahek Lake, which Scott referred to earlier in his presentation on the archaeologic history of the region. So the Labrador Trough started as a freshwater system. So freshwater rivers were eroding down red sand and gravel from the interior of the continent. And this is called the Seaward Formation. Stage 2, the land sank and was covered by a shallow sea. And fine mud was deposited. And this is the Antiguamogan Formation. And you can see examples of the Antiguamogan Formation around Jean Lake. There's outcrops there. And some of the trails in Wabash. So deposition was followed by carbonates, and this is the Denal Formation. And around Dooley Lake on the Wabash side, there's lots of this, and Flora Lake, so it's marble. And carbonates are only deposited in tropical environments like the present day Bahamas. And stromatolitic dolomite stretches for hundreds of kilometers along the eastern margin of the trough. And stromatolites are some of the earliest forms of life that there's evidence for. And they're analogous to coral reefs, and they require shallow, clear water to grow. So later I'm going to talk about the deposition of the iron formation, but these algae played an important part in the deposition of the iron formation. I'm just going to play a short video on what stromatolites actually are.
3 billion years ago, the Earth was a very different place. During the age known as the early Archean, single-celled photosynthetic bacteria in shallow ocean areas were forming structures known as stromatolites. These stromatolites are special because they represent the first fossils of life found on Earth. This is a stromatolite as it appears in lithic form, a record of the past that provides clues about what the ancient ocean environment it came from was like. Notice how the rock appears to have many layers. Notice also how it has a lobate shape. Cyanobacteria are some of the oldest single-celled life forms known to have populated the Earth. Stromatolites are formed when mats of cyanobacteria grow on top of one another generation after generation, trapping fine layers of carbonate on a sticky surface and building upon that surface over thousands of years. Here we can see the lobate structure of millions of generations of stromatolite deposition, and an example of what an individual component would be like when it was alive on the lower right side. Cyanobacteria still exist today. They derive their name from cyan, meaning blue. They are prokaryotic, or in other words, they have the most basic cell structure, similar to any common bacteria. They receive their energy by converting sunlight in a process known as photosynthesis, and they generated oxygen as a byproduct. This played a role in oxygenating Earth's oceans, changing them from oxidizing to reducing environments. Many important concepts in geology are understood by examining ongoing processes and assuming that they occurred the same way in the past as they do today. Several locations in the world still have cyanobacteria producing the once common stromatolite structures. It is by studying these still growing formations that scientists can understand what kind of ancient environment stromatolites were formed in. Current examples of stromatolites growing are found in the salty tidal pools of Shark Bay, Australia, as seen in this photo. These stromatolites are forming in salty shallow tide pools and reach up to 1 meter in height. Here are examples of stromatolites taken from the Jackson County Iron Formation in Wisconsin. Stromatolites ranging from 1 billion years old to over 3 billion years old have been found locally in Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, and parts of Ontario. From this we understand that ocean environments favorable to their formation existed for at least 2 billion years in Earth's history. Stromatolites are fascinating formations that can be very beautiful and teach us many lessons as some of the earliest evidence for life on Earth. Through the study of current living examples, we can unravel the mysteries of the oceans and of the ancient Earth. Thank you for watching this informative video.
Okay, so in stage 3, the land again sank and was covered by more gray mud, and that's the Dolly Formation, and I'm not sure if we can see it in this part of the trough. And after that, pure white quartz sand was deposited, which is called the Wishart Formation, and you can see that in the Smoky Mountain quartzites. That's the Wishart Formation, so that's what we're talking about there. And overlying the Wishart is the Soapman Formation, which is what we mine, and it's the economically most important. And I'll explain what iron formation is and how it's deposited a little bit later in the presentation. And stage 4, finally, after the deposition of the Soapman Formation, the land sank and a thick sequence of sand and mud, some carbon rich, was deposited, and that's called the Menehek Formation. And I know we see that sometimes at IOC. On the eastern side of the trough, a great thickness of lava was erupted onto the seafloor to form the doublet group. And I'll just show you a video on submarine volcanism.
Rivers of liquid rock plunge over the cliffs and into the water below. This is the front line in a battle between the elements. Most of the lava is swept away before it can settle. But inch by inch, the island grows. Below the waves, the battle rages on. As the lava hits the water, it's burning at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Cold currents from the deep set its temperature plummeting, releasing steam with explosive consequences. The lava fights on, but it's only a matter of time before its fire goes out. The commotion attracts attention.
Yeah, if we were to believe the authors of the former video, they would say nothing interesting ever happened in Labrador, but I think that's pretty interesting. And what's most interesting to me as a geologist is that when lava erupts underwater, it forms these pillow-shaped structures that are preserved in the geologic record, and that's how we know that this is happening in modern times, and we can see it in the geologic record. And a lot of times these structures are preserved even when the rocks are altered and metamorphosed. So, what is iron formation? Iron formation, abbreviated here is IF, is a chemical sedimentary rock containing greater than 15% iron. Now, I think the iron content at IOC in the ore before upgrading is like mid to high 30s, and that's because there's been some alteration and enrichment. And up in Shefferville, there's even more, and that's why they talk about 60% and call it DSO, direct shipping ore. And the banded iron formation is a common type and consists of layers of iron oxide and silica minerals. And Scott alluded to the chert before, so the chert is the silica mixed in with the iron in different layers. And iron formation is divided into superior and algoma type formation. And superior type is what we have in the Labrador Trough. It's laterally extensive, associated with sedimentary and volcanic rocks, and they are considered to have formed partly due to early biologic activity. And they are by far the largest tonnage of iron. And algomatite are laterally limited, associated mostly with volcanic rocks, and they are considered to have formed by precipitation from venting hydrothermal fluids. So just to give you a setting, so where there's little volcanoes here, we get the algomatite, and on the continental platform, similar to the Grand Banks, we would have had the superior type formed. So how did superior type formation form? So Earth's atmosphere had very little oxygen, and the exposed rocks above the sea had a lot of iron in them, which was eroded and ended up in the sea, in the ocean. But because there was no oxygen in the atmosphere or the water, this iron just remained suspended. Then when we get the photosynthetic algae, those stromatolites start to proliferate through the ocean. They're plants, so they're consuming carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, which oxygenated the seawater. So once oxygen was in the seawater, the iron that was also there started to combine and form iron oxide minerals, which sank to the bottom of the seafloor. And the alternating silica or quartz or chert layers signify periods of reduced oxygen levels and could mean reduced biologic activity, algae die-offs, or seasonal upwelling, like we have modern seasons today. And then how did algomatite form? They formed over a much more extensive range than the superior type, so from 3.8 billion to a few 100 million years ago. They're more thinly layered, and they lack continuity compared to superior. The banding is actually caused by temperature fluctuations within the volcano. So when the volcano is hotter, iron and zinc and metal-laden fluids are deposited, and when the volcano gets a little colder, you get quartz deposited. So Bathurst, New Brunswick, there's algoma-type iron formation at that mine. And this process is still observed today by researchers.
Hydrothermal vents are essentially hot springs under the ocean. The main place that we find these high temperature hydrothermal vents is along the mid-ocean ridge system, which is in fact the longest chain of volcanoes we have on our planet. The water is sufficiently hot that it could probably melt many metals, and so this is water that is able to be superheated because of the overlying pressure of the ocean water above, because you have to remember that the ocean, particularly in these places where there are volcanoes along the mid-ocean ridge, are perhaps 2,000.
So I'm going to stop the presentation there, or not stop the presentation, stop that video. And just kind of wrap up this presentation by talking about a bigger picture here. So figure 5 shows a larger view of the Canadian Shield, which we said is that old core rock central to North America. So by stripping away those islands, which we said collided into the Superior Province, we see that at one time it was surrounded by an ocean, the primitive ocean. And the iron formation was deposited around the margin. So the iron formations that we see in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan were also deposited at roughly the same time as the iron formation here in Labrador West. And I guess just another comment, so those formations in Minnesota especially are famous for their taconite ores, which are also, there's billions of tons of taconite ore up around Shefferville. So that's the less altered iron formation. So here in Lab West at IOC and down at ArcelorMittal, our iron formation is called metataconite, and it's been upgraded by metamorphism and alteration. So if you have any questions or comments, I'll be at the rock table there.
Thanks a lot, Pat. That was great. There's a few things you got learned there, so it was nice. Next, I like the movie there. This one is set a little more recently than 54. It's around 64. And it's an interesting. It was. I just think it was made by Preston Manors, which was well, actually it is still Cliffs technically. It was a division of Cliffs at the time, who ran the Wabash mines, and they ran Wabash mines under the name of Scully Mines in this region, and for, I guess that was Wabash Mines, Scully Mines. So some people might get confused by that, but Scully Mines and Wabash Mines is the same thing. All right, enjoy.
Processing starts by
back to the surface, where it undergoes countless additional operations, grinding to still smaller size, followed by several processing steps to separate the iron-bearing particles from the waste material. The product of the Scully operation is a concentrate which looks like black sand. Annual production of this high-grade ore product is 6 million tons. The concentrate is loaded off of long trains of 90-ton tank-type ore cars which carry it year-round to Point Noir near Setillo on the Gulf of St. Lawrence, where it will be given further processing. This same rail line serves Wabash in other ways. It carries fuel and freight and the necessities of life to Wabash families. It maintains a regular passenger schedule and even has special cars for autos. The rugged terrain along the railroad offers some of the most beautiful scenery in Canada. At Point Noir, the concentrate will be rolled into pellets of a uniform size desired by blast furnace operators. The pellets are baked in intense heat to make them hard enough to withstand shipment and repeated handling. And then they're loaded aboard the vessels which carry them to the steel-making centers of North America and Europe. Electric power is essential to the production of iron ore. Both the Scully mine and the town of Wabash get all the power they need from the Twin Falls hydroelectric project, of which Wabash Mines is part owner. Twin Falls is 110 miles to the northeast on the unknown river. This river is a tributary to the famous Churchill, which is also destined to be harnessed to serve the industry and homes of eastern Canada. What kind of a man is the modern-day iron miner at the Scully mine? He's a skilled worker, for modern technology is what made mining at Wabash possible. Typically, he learned his job in the Wabash Mines training program, for so many of the skills at the Scully are new. In an iron mine of 50 years ago, there was very little variety in the skills needed to take the ore from the ground. At Wabash Mines, a large number of different job descriptions are required to keep things going smoothly. With such a variety of jobs, Wabash personnel look forward to regular opportunities for advancement. Pay is good, yet there's constant incentive to attain a higher skill or responsibility. Opportunities at Wabash are permanent, but job assignments change as ability grows, and these jobs range from the deft hands and heavy responsibility demanded of men who operate the powerful and costly trucks, shovels, and drills. The giant machines which process the ore, or the busy trains. To the researchers and engineers who constantly evaluate the quality of the Wabash iron ore concentrate and seek ways to improve both the process and the product. These are mining men of today at the Scully mine. And so are the men who keep the equipment rolling. Nearly half of all employees work on maintenance. The modern machine shop occupies a large area in the maintenance building, 6 acres of floor space, all under one roof. Other maintenance divisions, all served by a complete storehouse of parts, include an electric shop, painting, plumbing, vulcanizing, instrument repair, and welding. Whether it's preventive maintenance or repair, or rebuilding, or even making a new part to an improved design, the equipment needed to do the job is right there. So the skilled hands of confident men working with modern tools can keep the Scully mining and processing operation going all year round. While Dad's busy keeping everything rolling in the plant, how about Mom and the kids? Like the youngsters are occupied with maintenance too. The children of Wabash are like children everywhere. Plenty of playmates assured and lots of things for kids to do. Among the young people organizations of Wabash are Girl Guides, Boy Scouts, and Sea Cadets. First-class educational opportunities at Wabash are provided by a school that is said to be unique in all Canada. It has 2 wings, which provide duplicate classrooms, one for Protestant students, another for Catholic youngsters. They share a central section with such special purpose rooms as a large gymnasium and laboratories. Other community facilities at Wabash include a large cafeteria. Here, hundreds of good meals are served every day to employees, including a single man who lived nearby in modern bachelor quarters. Also nearby is the Wabash Recreation Center. Its facilities include an electric-sized indoor pool, gymnasium, bowling alleys, libraries, movie theater, snack shop, and eating rooms used by the many civic, social, and hobby groups that have been organized by residents of all ages. Here we're looking in upon a joint meeting of the school board, Wabash citizens who contribute their time and talent to education. Besides the medical and dental offices at Wabash, Wabash and Labrador City share this modern 73-bed hospital. There are active growing churches too, serving all denominations. The Wilford Grenfell Hotel, built in the style of an old world chalet, is perhaps the most stated building in town. Service clubs such as the Lions, Kinsmen, Toastmasters, and Canadian Legion meet here. The Grenfell has 66 rooms, cocktail lounge, dining rooms with excellent food, and its street level, a bank, barber shop, beauty salon, and good restaurant. The hotel is a popular place to spend an evening out. Live music for dancing with occasional guest vocalists and entertainers are featured. Across the street from the hotel is the Wabash Plaza Shopping Center with a spacious parking lot and pleasant, fully stocked stores to satisfy just about any need, including a department store with fashion, home furnishings, appliances, sporting goods, and hardware. The modern supermarket. A drugstore. And the Wabash Post Office. Wabash is served by the busy Wabash Airport with several scheduled flights plus charter service and private flights. This is one of the area's bases for boat companies. The clear lakes around Wabash provide excellent fishing, but the remote camps on Labrador's countless lakes and streams lure thousands of sportsmen. The outdoors, of course, provides a great recreational bounty to the families of Wabash. Boats are common. The waterways leading from Wabash will carry you as far as 50 miles north without portaging. In the northern summer, nearby beaches are a popular place, although the pool and the recreation center make swimming a year-round pastime. In winter, these Wabash families will gather on the ski slopes instead of at the beach, explore on snowmobiles, go skating or coasting, and plan the same social activities in church, school, or circle of friends as with families anywhere, or simply spend more time relaxing with their favorite television programs. In short, the people of Wabash enjoy life. The things they do are as universal as baseball, or washing the family linen. Their homes are comfortable. Their children can breathe clean air. The men have pride in their work. Work to provide love for their families. Families who know how to relax. In a city called Wabash, built upon a hillside by a lake in Labrador.
So we're built on a hill next to a lake in Labrador, right? Anyway, that was great. I'd like to thank everyone for coming and the Area Society was really glad to be part of this event, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime. Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan. And I'm sure many of us in this room can imagine our parents or grandparents watching a video of that video or one like that for Lab City and luring us here and hence we're all here. Anyway, for our final item on the agenda, last but not least, I'd like to call upon Dr. Martha McDonald to talk a little bit about our plans for a children's book about Labrador West.
I was really glad to see that film because it really related to what I want to talk about. And I'll just show you some of the children's books that we've worked on. We've looked at the archaeological record and the geologic record, and this is the kind of oral history, oral literature record of Labrador. We got some funding during International Polar Year. Linda Nuyo-Flynn used to be here before Karen, and I applied for some money to produce a children's book. And I don't know if anyone's been to Nain. Anybody been to Nain? Some people here have been to Nain. Well, there's this rock on the hills in Nain, which is supposed to look like a polar bear. And it does. It does look like a polar bear. The whole book is based on the premise that it does, so we are assuming that it does look like a polar bear. What we wanted to do was to take a traditional story and then have a scientific explanation for the same phenomenon. And the reason for doing this was to not privilege one explanation over another, but to say that there are many different ways of seeing the world, and the traditional story in Nain of why the polar bear is there is accompanied by Dr. Derek Wilton's explanation of why it's there from the geological record. So in order to do this, 2 of my folklore students went home to Nain, where they were from, and collected, I think, 11 or 12 versions of this story. In traditional stories are told, they obviously vary from one to another because they're told orally and they change a little bit as they go along. So we collected these versions of the story. Some are in Inuktitut, some are in English, and we chose one that was a very sort of lyrical version of the story and told it, the polar bear and the rock story. I won't have time to read it to you because we're doing other things, but essentially the polar bear is attacking the people, and the shaman beats the drum, and it makes the polar bear freeze in his tracks, and you can still see that formation in the rocks in Nain. So this story has been told for a very long time, and it's translated into Inuktitut, and we gave it to all the grade 4 students in Labrador because that's when they start to learn about geology, and we put it at that reading level. So once we had done this one, we got interested in doing more stories. So the next one was from the Innu communities. This is a story of the man who married the beaver. And this story, in this case, wasn't collected by students. It was a story that was collected in the 1960s. And it was translated kind of literally word for word by Marguerite Mackenzie, who is a linguist at Memorial. And so I took the sort of literal translation and then the French version of the story and translated that one into English and kind of amalgamated it to make this story because it has some elements of it that I thought might not be, the children nowadays might not relish so much, where the beaver cubs are beaten to death with sticks. So I decided to say they were chased. So this story we chose because the scientific element of it was done by a wildlife biologist, Keith Chalk, who was our previous director. And it talks about the man who marries the beaver, and he wants to marry all these other animals, or mostly they want to marry him. He seems a bit sort of blasé about it, but these animals keep pursuing him, saying, "Oh, I want to marry you," and he says, "Build us a home," but he didn't like living with the porcupine, too prickly, didn't like living with the caribou, for various other reasons. So he marries the beaver, and other things happen. So we accompanied that with the stories of, or the sort of explanations of the wildlife from the biologist, and we had 2 different illustrators here. One was Jolene Ashley, who she's a geologist actually, and she's from the community of Chattagee, so she illustrated some parts of it, and Cynthia Caldesimo from Forto did the other illustration. So that was that one. And we have a couple more in progress now. One is from Southern Labrador. It's a story of Old Smoker. If anybody's been down Cartwright Black Tickle Way, the stories were collected there. The students there collected them. And Old Smoker is a person from the historic record. It's supposed to be someone who lived there. He drives a ghostly dog team, and you see him when a storm is coming. And so it's kind of a sign that you better watch out or be careful where you go because a storm is coming if you see Old Smoker. And so there are many, many stories of that. And so kids on the South Coast collected those stories, and we're about to produce that one. And with that, we want to have a meteorological accompanying piece, so I'm hoping to get Ryan Snon from CBC, so that would be really cool if he did that. And part of the reason we did this was because somebody told me in Maine that, before we ever started this, that kids were seeing possible jobs they might do if they wanted to leave their communities. So they knew about teachers and nurses and RCMP officers, and they didn't really know about other jobs. So we thought, well, maybe they would be natural geologists or biologists or meteorologists or a number of other things. So as well as giving them books in their own language and books that are stories from where they come from and the scientific knowledge, it's also kind of a way to say these are other things you might do. So we've got the old smoker one coming along, and another one down in Red Bay, which is the story of the stolen whale, and the story of the Basque whalers down in Red Bay. And apparently in the historic records, there's a story of 2 whaling crews that were around Red Bay, and one of them got a whale, and it was nighttime, and so they, I guess, tied up the dead whale to come back to process it the next day, and another whaling crew came in and untied it and took it away. So there was a lot of legal wrangling going on over this back in the 1500s. And it went on for about 40 years, and there are apparently records of insurance claims and so forth. And eventually the 2 whaling captains died, and the 2 widows settled this, over the final scene of our book is going to show them in the graveyard shaking hands over the demised captain. So, and in that one, the scientific part will be about the whales. So I wanted to do a book, of course, here in Labrador West, and I think the scientific part of it would certainly be to do with mining, though I'm open to all kinds of ideas. But what I found was, because these are traditional stories, what we would call etiological legends that explain landforms, but the smoker legend is a supernatural legend, but there are all kinds of other stories, and folklorists also study oral history, and that's unlike the geologic record, which would take a great deal of time to reassemble, and the archaeological record, which has to be derived from little bits and pieces of things that Scott finds, we just go out and ask people, and therefore we can get the stories that are quite a bit more recent and see how they are being handed around. So in 2002, 2003, we did something called mug-ups, and we went to 16 communities in Labrador and invited people for lunch and recorded their stories. So we talked about fairy beliefs in Black Tipple, we talked about gardening practices in West St. Maudis, we talked about school days in Makova, and all kinds of other things that people were interested in, and a lot of them were published in them days. So when we went to Labrador City, a lot of people came to this lunch and talked to us about their early life here. And a community is a community wherever it is, and some have been around for a very long time, but the process that brings people together to create a home is people looking for work or a livelihood, and around that they build a sense of community, and of course that's what happened here. When we were here in 2002, we were starting to see people who were planning to stay here, who were retiring, and that was when I got the real sense of this was a place that was people's ongoing home, that they were here and this was where they were going to stay. So one of the stories, several of the stories we got were not from the Iron Men of the Aura 54, but the women who came along and helped to make this a community. And we got several versions of the same story, and this is what I think that could be the basis of a book. But I would really like to hear from other people, and I'd like to come back and collect some stories. So to close, I'll read an account that I think is a really good story about what people saw as a sense of community in this place and how they made it happen. So this was a lady who talked about when people first came here. I came in '62, and then I talked to another lady called Joan. When did you come, Joan? '62. My husband came here to work at Carroll Lake in 1960. I was in St. John's for 2 years with 6 children, waiting for a place to bring them. If you had any more than 2 or 4 children, you had to wait until that 4-bedroom house was built. So I had to wait for 2 years. And this is me. And what did you think when you got here? What was it like? When I got here, after being on my own with 6 children, I was so happy. I never regretted coming here, still don't today. I retired here, we watched the town grow. I had no idea what it was like here, absolutely none. I dressed up and got high heel shoes on, nice big coat and everything. Get off the plane, I will never forget it. I went above my ankles in mud. At Christmas now, you always, even if you had 6 children, you always had extra men from the bunkhouse. We We had extra presents underneath the tree. We'd go over and get people from the staff houses or the bunkhouse that had no place to go, and they'd be here for Christmas dinner. Nobody went home at Christmas time. You couldn't afford it. And they talked about going out and how difficult it was to go out and put your car on the barge or on the train and so on. But so many people talked about getting off the plane in the middle of winter, and it was 60 below. They were wearing their high heels, but they had the 6 kids, and they were happy to be here. So that's the story I think that we might like to write for a children's book here. So thanks very much.
Okay, thanks to everyone for coming out this evening, and we really enjoyed sharing a little bit about the Labrador Institute and the Heritage Society and R&R Company Canada with you. It's the Labrador Institute's hope to do more of these kinds of things in the future. We're really excited to continue to build some partnerships in addition to the ones we built with this event, and we'd like to build some more with the towns and with unions or any other organizations in town. And we're hoping to bring these kinds of events to you. And as Scott mentioned earlier, we're starting a Labrador West Speaker Series, and tomorrow night will be our debut, and Scott will be the first speaker. So if you want to hear more about the archaeological history of Ashwaubenon, come out to Gateway tomorrow at 7. And there will be more those kinds of things coming. We're hoping to do one once a month. So keep your ears and eyes out for it. And now we're going to draw for some prizes before we close for the evening. And feel free to stay and have another cup of coffee or another piece of broccoli or whatever. So if anybody doesn't have their name in, you got like 2 seconds to get it in. Okay, you want to put your name in? You're the only one to put your hand up. My name, you're right there. Anybody else didn't get their name in?
That's so cool.
Good prizes.
Some of them we do, and I remember I left them down for a bit during 9. The films? The films? Yeah, like the Wabash ones. Yeah, we have some. We have 1 or 2, I think. Yeah.
Are there any recent ones?
These are recent ones.
Yeah, oh, they're recent. I'm not sure. They have one on the public library here as well. It's a nice one too.
I haven't seen the final.
Yeah.
Your name.
Great, thanks. Last one to put it condo?
Put it in better. Raw ones in? Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
And can I get your biggest one?
Absolutely.
Merv McDonald. Hey, Sharon. You're excited. Craig Purves. Hey, thanks guys, thanks for coming out, and